Hello everyone, and welcome to the final video of Module 8. In this video, we're going to be talking about practical issues to think about when creating your rituals. Some of this is going to be for personal rituals, but a lot of it is going to be focused on doing group rituals. So things to think about when you're holding a ritual for a whole group of people, okay? So let's start off by talking about what we need to think about before we do a ritual, okay? So firstly, we're going to be planning that ritual. You need to have some sort of pre-planning session, okay, especially if you're involving other people. But remember that things won't go as planned, okay? You need to accept that this is going to happen, and you need to make plans for possible issues. For example, what if someone hasn't turned up or is late? What if you forget the lines or they forget their lines? Or what if you forget a tool that you need? Can you quickly adapt an outdoor script to indoors? For instance, if it's raining and you suddenly have to move indoors. What happens if a fire engine or the police might turn up? Gods can also take the ritual in a different direction too than you envisage. So you need to be ready for these things. You need to plan, you need to think about possible scenarios and what might happen. You need to then think about a ritual theme, okay? Decide on your ritual theme and bring in the elements associated with that. Particular deities, particular symbols, particular songs, things like that, okay? You need to think about rehearsals. If you can, rehearse or ritual first, especially if you're going to be doing it with other people, okay? So you can identify any issues and anticipate any problems. Practice any songs, music, plays, and chants beforehand. Know who's going to do each part. Make sure you and the other people know the script well, and particularly where to stand as well. Think about each of the different participants that are going to be part of this and what skills they can offer, okay? Think about timeliness. What happens if someone turns up late? Will you still let them in? How will you make sure everyone knows the start time and to be on time? How will you summon people to begin the ritual? For instance, could you blow a horn? How will you leave enough time to arrive at the ritual and do the setup? How long are you going to need for that? Then think about when are you going to do the ritual? Is it a specific date? Does it need to be on a full moon, for example? What about when is everyone free? Because sometimes people can't do it if they've got to work, particularly in the weekdays. Think about liminal times. For instance, could you do it at sunset? Check the weather forecast if you're going to be doing it outdoors, so that you can plan for that. And then how long is the ritual going to take? Do you have a limited time that you can use the site? You need to make sure your ritual is only that long. How will people know the start and end times? How are you going to communicate that to everybody? What about your pacing of ritual? How are you going to pace it? What happens if people get tired? If there's many people, how can you speed up certain aspects? Like giving everyone a drink, which might take ages normally, if you go around one at a time to give everyone. So you maybe have multiple people giving drinks, okay? Or maybe you get someone to stand there as they enter and you give them a cup and then pour the drink so that each person, as they start to process into the ritual area, could be given a cup of drink. Or can something else be going on at the same time as a lull in the proceedings, like music or meditation of some kind? Maybe everyone's in a 10-minute meditation while you hand out all the cups and drinks and stuff. I don't know, things like that. Okay. Think about your location. Are you indoors or are you going to be outdoors? Is it quiet? Obviously, doing something on a private land is better than doing it on a public land because you've got more control. Are you going to hire a hall? What about the noise acoustics? What about site bylaws? Are there laws against having fire or against alcohol consumption? If you're going to do a procession, where are you going to meet beforehand to do that procession? What's the weather going to be like? If you're going to be standing in the hot heat for a long time, can you do it somewhere where there's shade? Because people might otherwise get heat stroke. Will there be a location cost? Okay, particularly say if you want to get a meeting hall or something. And if so, can you ask people to contribute? You want to try and check out the site up front so you know what's going to be there and what to expect. And you can plan things out in your mind. Is there parking? Is there public transport for people who can't park? Does the ritual area need to be marked out? Okay, So these are things to think about for the location. Then there's the preparation. Do you have all the items you need? Do you have your tools? Do you have the robes? Do you have the props? Do you have the offerings? Do you have drink, including non-alcoholic options? Do you have food? Do you have the fire tools and enough wood? Okay, you need to bring this stuff with you. Don't cut trees down. Okay, don't cut your local trees down when you do a fire. Bring the wood with you. Do you have enough scripts, both for you and any other participants that need scripts? Do you have your instruments? Do you have your decorations? Do you have a way to open the drinks bottle? Okay, so you don't want to be there fiddling with it for 10 minutes. You want it to go smoothly. Does everyone else have what they need? Have you told them what they need to bring? Do you have some name badges so that people can identify who are the key staff? When you think about food and drink, okay, who will provide the food and where? Is there going to be a potluck maybe afterwards? Are you going to make sure you coordinate so people bring different things? Maybe there needs to be some sort of list. You need to bring enough food, drink, and utensils for everyone, okay? Make sure you're using biodegradable things, not plastic, okay? Think about how many people might attend, especially if you're doing a public ritual. Do you need cooking facilities? Who will do the washing up at the end? What about hygiene and illness? How do you prevent illness spreading? Maybe everyone brings their own cups, or you have cupbearers to bring things around to people. Then think about site preparation. Is the altar or altars prepared? Where are you going to place the altar? Are there any symbols or banners or decorations that you need to put up because you want to make it look good, don't you? As we talked earlier in this module. Do you have a cloth to go on the altar? Do you need to set chairs out, particularly if people are not able to stand for long periods of time, like disabled? Does the area need closing off from the public? And how are you going to do that? Is there any fire built and burning? If you're outside, are your candles windproof? So maybe you get jars and you put your candles within the jars to make them windproof. Is the site itself being kept safe? Are you thinking about fire safety? Are ritual tools and offerings out of the way of pets, so more so in the house? Are you making sure that you're keeping them out of the way? Fire. So what are you going to do with your fire? Well, you might want to have it pre-lit so people don't have to stand around waiting while you light the fire. Maybe you're going to need to take a fire pit with you because you might not be allowed to use it on the ground. You need to follow any local bylaws. And remember, of course, fire safety. Make sure you have things like water to hand and stuff like that, or sand for anything to go on top of that's heated and things like that. Consider solar torches to light an outdoor area rather than candles, okay? Because candles really only work outdoors if they're enclosed in glass. Remember to bring your matches. Check the wood is dry enough or the candle wicks are long enough. What about your ceremonial baths? How are you going to cleanse before your ritual? Okay. Then think about the purpose of your ritual. What is the purpose of the ritual? How will we make that clear to everybody? How will the actions and the themes in the ritual focus on that? Do you need to have a time beforehand where you're going to sort of tell everybody what everything's about and what they should expect? Folk binding or the group mind, bringing people united together in a similar mind. People are going to come with different emotional states, distractions, they'll be angry, they'll be anxious, all that sort of stuff. How are you going to get them focused? How are you going to get them clearing negativity and open to the spirits instead? Okay. What happens if there are conflicts between group members? Or is anyone against each other? How will you deal with that? One great thing to do is a pre-ritual meditation. Okay. So you lead them into a very calm meditative state. What about after the ritual? How are you going to deal with that? Who's going to clean up? How will you dispose of any offerings, particularly making sure they're eco-friendly? Or how will you deal with litter, lost property, chairs, if you had to put chairs out, fire? How will you get rid of that and make sure that it's not a risk? How will you ensure that everyone leaves no trace and that you leave no trace? Maybe you need to bring some black bags for your litter. Recycle things, cleaning up spills. How are you going to deal with that? If you're inside, sweeping or mopping the floor, putting chairs and tables back. Remember, mead is sticky, so if you're flinging that around on people or things, you need to clear that up. Who is going to do these things? Is it going to be you? Is it going to be other people? How will you gather feedback, okay, from others after the ritual for how it went, what went well, what didn't? Don't do any critical analysis, though, for about 24 hours. Wait, let the dust settle, let everything settle, and then do the critical analysis and gather feedback. What happens if disruptive or antagonistic and fundamentalist people turn up? Have a plan for how you're going to deal with that, particularly for a public ritual, because they often do turn up. It's a good idea to create for yourself basically a pre-ritual checklist to make sure you've thought about all these things. So go back through what I've said here, write out, turn it all into a checklist, basically, of things to ask yourself and think through. And then before each ritual, you just go through, tick it all off when you're happy that you've done it, okay? This is more important when you're in a group ritual than an individual ritual, but some of this stuff is still applicable to an individual ritual as well, okay? Okay, so then you need to think about a pre-ritual briefing. This is very much for a, if you've got a group of people, not so much for yourself here, okay? So firstly, a pre-ritual briefing helps create group mind and a shared theology, a worldview, a mythology, because might be new people or even heathens that aren't part of your group, so they may not understand how you do things. So if you give this pre-ritual briefing to them, then the more people then they understand what's going on, they'll have the same worldview and the same expectations. And actually, the more people share this worldview, the more powerful the ritual can be. So you need to talk about what's going to happen, explain so that basically everyone's on the same page. For example, advise you'll be sprinkling them with mead. There'll be a non-alcoholic horn for people, things like that. Okay, just to explain all the important practicalities that people should know. Explain the background to any deities or spirits or myths or practices that will be part of the ritual, okay, because they may not know these things. If there's atheists present, and you will find heathen atheists, advise that they still need to treat the spirits with respect, even if they just see them as symbols, okay? Talk about what is acceptable behavior, okay? So explain any rules, any taboos, any expectations. For example, will you allow people to hail Loki? Some heathens like that, some people don't. Talk about drunkenness and not getting drunk and remind people about drink driving. Will you allow swords? Some people like to wear swords in there. And definitely warn people about racist, sexist, and homophobic remarks and they're not acceptable, okay? Health and safety. So maybe tell them what to do in an emergency or an interruption. The fire, keep them away from the fire, for instance. Remind them to turn off their phones. All mobile phones should be turned off in a ritual. There's a risk that electricity may affect the ritual as well anyway, but also there's the disturbances, obviously from phone calls and texts and sounds that shouldn't be happening. Ban photography, if I was you. This is both to stop interruption and stop the risk of attack. People being there may not want their faces out in public. So if you're doing a ritual, people may not want their photo taken, basically. So ban any type of photography. A, it will keep people more focused, and B, it will stop risks of things happening. Toilet facilities. Talked about that, what there are, and are people allowed to leave the space to use the bathroom if they need to? Think about that. How do you want people to stand in the ritual? So do you want them in a circle? Do you want them in a semicircle? How are they supposed to stand? Do they need to have anything with them? A cup or a horn, a plate, prayers, offerings, instruments, okay? You might need to tell them even before this pre-ritual briefing about that, or on the day, tell them, depending on what it is. Explain any special language terms you'll be using. So if you're going to use other languages, like Old Norse or Old English, you need to maybe explain what those terms mean. Teach them any chants so everyone can join in, and maybe hand out chant or song scripts, okay, so everyone knows what they're saying, what they need to do, and what the chants are. And then answer any questions that people have. But you're probably going to be doing this just before your ritual, so you want to keep this short. You just want to go through the most important points, make sure everyone knows what they're doing, make sure everyone's on the same page, and then you can start like your procession or whatever. Another thing to think about is communication, okay? So we talked about using old languages like Old English, Old Norse, okay? It sounds nice. It can help you think in that particular worldview, and it sends a message to your subconscious that something special is happening, okay? So it's nice to do that. But will everyone understand what you're saying? Can you actually pronounce the words, okay? So explain these sorts of things in the pre-ritual briefing. Maybe use short phrases, a few short phrases, not loads of stuff. How informal and formal are you going to make the communication in the language, okay? Are you going to have a set liturgy? With a rich, full written script? Are you going to have more spontaneous prayers and things at different times? When will you use each of these things? For communication in group rituals, can everyone understand you? Or are you using some jargon? Okay, think about that. Will the children understand what you're talking about? And are you speaking loud enough? Are you projecting your voice? How will you advertise it, particularly for group rituals? How will people know when and where the event is? If you're opening it to the public, how will members of the public know about it? Write things down. So ritual scripts, I mean, ideally you'll know these by heart, or at least well enough that you won't have to keep reading from it, but that's not always practical. So have a script, even if you do know it by heart, so you can just refer to it if anything goes wrong and you forget something. Have some cue cards maybe, that's probably easier. And remember that poetry is easier to remember than prose. So if you have some poetic parts to your script, you're probably going to, and you use them regularly, you're going to be able to remember them much easier, okay? Consider that call and response thing where you say something and the audience responds, and you say again and the audience responds. It's a back and flow energy, okay? It also means the audience is participating then. They're not just being entertained and sat there watching you, they're actually participating in things. Okay, and you do want participation to be quite an important part of this. Think about the familiarity with the ritual. Like I said, the pre-ritual briefing, explain beforehand. Think about, do people know their scripts? Do people know any songs and chants? Pass out paper with songs and chants beforehand so that people have got those things. When it comes to chants, consider the words and the complexity of those words, but also the sounds being made, okay? These chants work best if they're just the short ones, a couple of lines, okay? Don't have long chants, okay, because that won't work. A few short lines, that's fine. Also, make sure the language you're using isn't going to offend people. People will get offended if you use lots of swearing. People might get offended if you use non-inclusive language as well, okay? So consider what you're saying and how you can make sure everyone is included and not feeling offended. Think about voice control. So warm up your voice beforehand. Vary the pitch and the speed and the volume of your voice. Will it be something where you're singing or spoken mostly? Okay. If it's a big circle, will people be able to hear you? Okay. Can you move people closer so they can hear you? Okay. Maybe you have multiple circles. And then we've got inclusivity and safety, okay? So firstly, you've got your safe use of props. Is there enough room to move around? This is probably more actually important when you're in your house, okay? Is there enough room to move around? Will things hit anybody, okay? How do you keep participants back? How do you keep your props safe and out of the way when they're not in use, okay? Particularly if you've got swords and blades and other sort of more dangerous things. You don't want things falling over. You don't want liquids, hot liquids particularly, or fire being around, so being a risk. So how do you keep that safe? How do you ensure you don't burn yourself when you're moving around and picking up tools? How do you ensure you're not going to trip? Okay, make sure the area is clean of any trip hazards. Things can go wrong. What is your plan if they do? Anticipate some scenarios. Have some contingency plans and also plan for emergencies. What if someone, for instance, faints or trips and hurts themselves or cuts themselves? You've got a first aid kit and all that sort of stuff. Knives, weapons, hammers, dangerous tools. What are the laws on knives? Will you allow swords in the ceremony? Okay, think about these things. Fire safety. So have water and a fire extinguisher ready. Never leave your fires unattended or incense unattended. Use a heat-proof surface for fire to go on, particularly if you're inside. Or even outside, you could use a fire pit or a cauldron or something. And if outdoors, don't have fires near very dry material or under trees or on sacred rocks. We've talked before about the fact that People who put candles and burn candle wax all over sacred stones and things, or under a tree, and then that really ancient tree gets set on fire and is destroyed. So think about safety here, okay? And how will you keep people like children away from the fire? How will you safely carry fire around the site? Okay, if you're burning anything, how will you keep it safe while it's burning? You want to keep fire small and easy to handle, okay? Consider also the wind. Don't keep flammable things downwind of it or too close, especially your robe, okay? You don't want to be set on fire yourself, okay? Never use lighter fluid or gasoline, okay? There's no reason to use that, and it would just make things burn quick and get dangerous very quick. Make sure a fire is very well extinguished at the end, okay? A good idea would be to, say, appoint a fire warden, okay? Someone who can keep an eye on the fire, make sure it's safe, light it in the first place, keep everyone away that's supposed to be away, that sort of thing. Having a fire warden is a good idea. And be aware of where fire alarms are and if they'll go off, okay? What's your plan if they go off? Also, there may be it may be planned if you're in like a community building that they're going to go off at a certain time. Be aware of that and check that. Have a first aid kit available. Then you need to think about dietary needs. If you're going to have food there or drink there, what will you do for those who are alcoholics or pregnant, people who are teetotal, people who can't have alcohol, basically? Have this non-alcoholic version. What if they're gluten issues, or they're vegan, or they've got allergies, or they're on some low-carb diet, or they're diabetic? What are you going to have for them? How will you cater for them? I would suggest you do have a non-alcoholic drink option in a separate horn, and have gluten-free, allergy-free, low-sugar, vegan option foods for people. Mark out that non-alcoholic drink horn, okay? So tie a ribbon around it maybe, so that it's very obvious to people which one is which, because you don't want to get to the point where you've forgotten which horn was the right one, okay? And you want to make sure there's a shared worldview or theology or mythology. If there isn't, do people differ in this? And how will you overcome this? Pre-ritual briefing is a good idea for doing that, okay? To explain everything. Think about the needs and expectations of the participants and also the spirits. What are the needs of each participant? What might they be expecting to get out of it? And the same with the spirits. What are their needs and what do they expect? Remember that some people are going to be open to participating and or taking on some responsibility, but many others won't, okay? So you need to use the skills of those who would like to help and allow those who don't want to participate to do so. Think about special needs, okay? What about physical needs? Mobility. Is the site accessible for the disabled, for wheelchairs, for pregnant people, for the elderly? Are there places to sit for them? Can they come to the site first and help while others are doing the procession, maybe? Okay. What about people with asthma or allergies? Think about how incense is going to affect them. Food, oils, smoke. Okay, how is that going to affect? Think about height differences. Can everyone see? Okay. Is it hard to hold hands? Okay, if you're holding hands in a circle or something. Think about illnesses and contagious diseases. Be careful about saliva and blood mixing. Get people to use their own cups. Think about chemical intolerance. As I said, pregnant people, alcoholics, diabetics. Think about their food and drink options for them. Okay, so there's different special needs that you need to consider to make it inclusive and safe for everybody. Then you've got special needs of sensory ones. People with vision issues, like they're nearsighted or they're farsighted or they're colorblind. Can the people see what's going on? Is it a risk if they have to move? Think about the flashing lights might be bad for epilepsy. And consider the light conditions, for example, for walking to the site or for reading the scripts. Can people actually see what's going on? Think about hearing. Are they hard of hearing and deaf? Maybe you could have a sign language translator there if there's going to be people that are deaf. Sudden loud noises can also be bad for people. Traffic could be an issue that could make it hard to hear as well. Some people may become uncomfortable if there's involving physical contact. Okay, so maybe you don't want to have physical contact, or people have the option for it. Making it multi-sensory can help these things. Okay, If they haven't got the experience of one sense, they can pick up from the other senses. Then you've got sort of the mental special needs. So does someone have dyslexia, for instance? Is the language too high for their understanding? So dyslexia, if they're going to read and stuff. Kids, is the language level too high for the kids' understanding? And then is it a welcoming atmosphere for minority groups, LGBTQ groups, the BAME, the Black, Asian, minority ethnic groups, and others like that. So you need to consider, are you making things very inclusive for them? Particularly in heathenry, there's been a lot of history of racism and homophobia and things like that. You need to make it clear to people that A, those things are not allowed and not acceptable, and also that people who are from minority groups you need to make them feel welcome and able to join in. And then remember hospitality. Okay, this is the most important thing. Why is inclusivity important? Because it's hospitality. You're making it welcoming, whether it's to humans or to the spirits. Okay, you're trying to be a good host for your guests. Okay. Racist, homophobic, sexist remarks. How will you deal with these if people do bring it up? Okay, if people do say these things. Okay, you need to anticipate that, even if you've told them not to. First aid. Is there someone trained in first aid? Also, is there someone who can help with psychological emergency, a schizophrenia episode, a flashback, emotional breakdown, something like that? Okay. And I'm not saying you have to have all these specialist trained people there, but it's things to think about, okay, when you're planning this. Is it children and family friendly? Is the ritual going to be for children and families? And if so, is it family friendly or not? Make that clear beforehand to people, okay, so they know whether to bring their kids. If there are kids and babies around, how will they be entertained? How will you deal with interruptions from them, like if they're crying or something, or they're fighting or screaming in the corner? Could you provide a creche? What will the kids be drinking? Okay, because they're going to want to be part of the ceremony. What about timing? Kids need to go to bed at certain times. What time are you setting the ceremony for? Will the ritual just be long and boring for them? How can you involve them so they're not feeling bored? Singing, acting, playing instruments, dancing, making something, using stories, sound and color, all these sorts of things can help. What about teenagers? They're often going to be there for social reasons, okay? And you need to make their participation meaningful, not just a side thing, but something that they feel is important. What happens if someone turns up late and you've already started? For instance, in the Alpha Blot ceremony in the lore, people weren't allowed in if that happened. But maybe you will allow people to turn up late. You need to make a decision on that and make it clear to people beforehand what will happen. Do you want it open to the public or just a select group of people that have been vouched for, maybe? Particularly because there are examples of members of the public, family, people invading a space or heckling people, okay? How can you keep the public who aren't supposed to be there away from the site? Do you need to put signs up? I mean, most people will be respectful if they read a sign explaining what's going on, how they should act, okay? So you can usually do that, but also have someone on hand maybe to deal with it if things get out of hand. How will those people react, though, if you're waving a knife around? Do you need guardian volunteers to stand guard at certain points? Okay. And then do you need to give people any script so they can effectively join in? Okay, if they don't know what's going on, the script can help them. Okay, so there's a lot of things to think about when you're planning a ritual, particularly if you're planning a group ritual. Okay, it takes things to a whole another level when you start to get into that sort of thing. Okay. What you could do, though, if you've got a group ritual, is have particular roles for people, okay? You have your Gothi, your sort of main leaders who are leading everything. You have maybe your organizer or your promoter, the person who's going to maybe find the site and be the main contact, send out any info to participants, schedule meetings, and so on. You have your skulls, your sort of musicians and poets to do the music. You have maybe welcomers to welcome people in. You have your cupbearers to bring people the drinks, okay? Carry the horn around and pour it out for people. You have your fire warden, someone specifically looking after the fire and keeping everything safe there. You have your warriors or your guardians, people who can protect space and deal with the emergencies that arise. Maybe you have a first aider, maybe a creche leader, maybe a cook, maybe people to set up the site, put it away and clean the site at the end. Okay. But importantly, saying that is get everyone else involved too, especially with things like clearing up the litter, putting chairs away, all that sort of stuff. Okay. So if you've got a group ritual and you've got lots of people, you can get some people to take on some of these other roles. If it's just you and a couple of others, you might have to do multiple roles, basically. And obviously some of this is just not relevant if you're just doing a ritual on your own individually. Okay. But it's things to think about if you're going to do a group ritual. Okay. So that's the end of this module on ritual practice. So there are some bits and pieces of homework I want you to do. So firstly, I want you to write a blot ritual script, okay, to do a blot. I'm going to send you one, okay, probably there's going to be linked down below. Use that, but as your basis, but also just feel free to change it, add in, take away, do whatever you want to make it a ritual blot script, okay? And this is going to be important, especially if you are going to be, if you want a diploma at the end of this thing, a certificate, you need to have a copy of that ritual script, okay, to send. Think about ways which you can make your rituals ecstatic, beautiful, multi-sensory, poetic, theatrical, and atmospheric, so that it's an experience for both you and the gods and spirits. So don't just write out your ritual. Bring in all the elements we've talked about in all these videos, okay, and make it a nice ritual, okay, using poetry in the rituals, using altered states of consciousness, using all your different senses, having maybe plays or music or things like that, that sort of stuff. If there's any tools you don't actually yet have, find or purchase them, okay, particularly those 9 most essential ones, all right? And then I want you to practice and perform a blot indoors at your altar, and then do another one outdoors, okay? And practice them both and see how they change. Get used to what might go wrong. It's fine if things go wrong in them. Okay, this is about learning, okay? It's getting things to go, work out what you need to do to make them go well in future. And then if you're part of a group, or you can find a group, consider doing a sumble with others, okay? Whether you organize that or someone else does, consider taking part in that. And then there's just some recommended reading. The Mead Hall by Stephen Pollington is really good for talking about sumble. You've got Sacred Gifts by Kirk Thomas, which gives a lot of the foundational information about sacrifice and why we do ritual. You've got Neo-Pagan Rites by Isaac Bonowitz. If you're going to be planning any rituals for others, this is an essential read, okay? You need to get hold of that book. Myths and Symbols in Pagan Europe by H.R. Ellis Davison is really good. Heimskringla, Germania, Beowulf, Akabot Charm, all these are sources I've used in this module to get, and these are just like historic examples of how rituals worked, as well as the 12th century herbal charm as well. There's a link there for that one. And then there's a bit of an article about animal masks and some examples of pictures and photos of things that, again, you could take inspiration. Okay, so do these homework, write your script, practice and perform it indoors and outdoors, and then I will see you in the next module. Thanks very much.